And we are back once again. If you're watching this and you are a rando, I am very sorry for you for subjecting you to these few seconds of seeing my face and this content. But don't go yet, unless you are going to be very bored by the things I'm about to be talking about, which will be the Donald Trump indictment over his involvement in January 6th, and overall the attempted insurrection on January 6th. Now, on the other hand, you're probably reading my manifesto and clicked on the link, or you clicked on this video after watching the previous video on the indictment itself, in which case, thank you for continuing to watch these very long videos. So, if you were watching my last video, you know that this is an popular left-wing content creator, Destiny's Obsidian Notes, that covers the entirety of the January 6th attempted insurrection, which I used heavily in my own January 6th section in my manifesto. If you didn't know that, well, now you do. So we will be going over the majority of this, going over what Trump did to further his goal to take back power, or continue his power, I should say, and all the illegalities that were involved in this. So, let's get started. Undermining the electoral process. Donald Trump made statements about the election being rigged even prior to the 2016 election, and continually called for the complete and total ban on mail-in ballots. ABC News cataloged a lot of the false election claims, and I've included some below. Destiny. Nice. Foreknowledge of disparate attitudes towards mail-in voting. 10 states allowed early voting via mail as early as September for the 2020 election. Donald Trump is making multiple claims of voter fraud via mail-in ballots, which Democrats were known to utilize in greater numbers than Republicans, despite Trump having absolutely no evidence of said voter fraud, and despite counting having not even yet begun and no numbers being published. From Dominion v. Fox News, the court case. Not surprisingly, given these trends, the head of the Fox News decision desk correctly predicted that, quote, on election night, we may be looking at states where it seems that President Trump is in the lead, but there's still 20 or 30% of the vote outstanding, so we're not going to be able to make the call in those states, end quote. He correctly recognized, and what Fox widely and repeatedly reported before the election, that this would occur because President Trump had criticized mail-in voting and encouraged Republicans to vote in person, whereas Democrats had encouraged their supporters to vote by mail. In fact, Maria Bartiromo discussed this very phenomenon with President Trump on October 11, 2020 in an interview, with President Trump lamenting that mail-in votes would likely be counted, quote, 2 weeks after the vote comes in, end quote, and saying that, quote, Republicans are going out to vote. They don't want to do the mail-in ballot thing. They don't trust it. Republicans are going out to vote, end quote. Fox News was also complicit in the process, helping Trump fabricate and prepare to push lies in the event that he lost the election. From the Daily Beast. Officially, it looks like an attempt to report on election irregularities. What it feels like is an attempt to push more baseless conspiracy theories and scare the viewers into thinking the election is being stolen. It isn't. One Fox News veteran with direct knowledge of the Election Integrity Project told the Daily Beast, quote, it's alarming that the brain room is a part of this. Like, it's an attempt to give an air of legitimacy. I don't recall ever seeing anything like this before, end quote. This person added, quote, it feels like an attempt to use the brain room to try to lend credibility to something that is incredible. It feels like a stunt to support Trump's baseless allegations that the Democrats are trying to steal the election. If it is a collection or databases of alleged voter fraud examples, I could see it being used to support Trump's efforts to contest the election results if Biden wins, end quote. A second Fox News staffer, who, like other current employees quoted in the story, asked not to be further identified for the fears of retaliation, said the Election Integrity Project, quote, seems a logical effort to collect information about mail-in ballots that could skew the results. Fox clearly wants to portray mail-in ballots in the most negative light, since Democrats favor it in Trump's re-election, if polls are to be believed this time around, is not at all a foregone conclusion. He and GOP leaders are promoting doubt about the system, which arguably has its flaws, and of course Fox serves as a force multiplied to the narratives, end quote. Some politicians, like Bernie Sanders, literally predicted on October 23, 2020, the exact outcome of election night because it was already known that mail-in ballots might take a bit longer to count and they would likely dramatically favor Democrats. Sanders even predicted Trump trying to end the voting early. Let's watch that video.
I didn't join the military to protect career politicians. I serve for citizens like you and me.
Yes.
I'm voting yes on issue 1 to stop politicians from manipulating.
Here is my worry. What polls show and what studies have shown is that for whatever reason, Democrats are more likely to use mail-in ballots. Republicans are more likely to walk into polling booths on election day. It is likely that the first votes that will be counted will be those people who came in on election day, which will be Republican. And here is the fear, and I hope everybody hears that. It could well be, and I don't know what's going to happen, nobody does, but it could well be that at 10 o'clock on election night, Trump is winning in Michigan, he's winning in Pennsylvania, he's winning in Wisconsin, and he gets on the television, he says, "Thank you, Americans, for re-electing me. It's all over. Have a good day." But then the next day and the day following, all of those mail-in ballots start getting counted, and it turns out that Biden has won those states. At which point Trump says, "See, I told you the whole thing was fraudulent. I told you those mail-in ballots were crooked, and we're not going to leave office."
And we were getting ready.
Spoilers for a future clip. But anyways, this was not a secret. But here's a couple of things from the Trump's false claims of fraud in past elections. The 2012 election, on November 6th, 2012, Donald Trump tweeted that people should march on Washington to protest the election results. A few minutes later, he claimed that America is not a democracy. The 2016 election, which he won. In February 2016, Donald Trump claimed that Ted Cruz's campaign rigged the Iowa caucus. On April 16, 2016, Donald Trump tweeted that the Republican primaries were rigged and being controlled. On that appearance that he references, he goes on to speak about how delegates are just bribed and paid off to vote for certain candidates. On August 1st, 2016, Donald Trump claimed the last election in 2012 was rigged and claims with certainty that the 2016 election on November 8th is going to be rigged and that Republicans better be careful. In October 2016, Donald Trump claimed they were trying to rig the election at the polling booths, saying dead people were voting, illegal immigrants were voting, and that they were fighting in a rigged election. Sounds familiar? On November 27th, 2016, Donald Trump tweeted that he would have won the popular vote against Hillary if you deduct the millions of people who voted illegally. From May 11th, 2017 to January 3rd, 2018, Trump created the Presidential Advisory Committee on Election Integrity, also known as the Voter Fraud Commission, and requested an unusually invasive amount of voter data from the states, but all 50 states refused to comply, including Republican ones. Not a single state allowed compliance. After Maine Secretary of State Matthew Dunlap filed a lawsuit against the Republican members of the commission for not sharing documents or scheduling information, the commission was disbanded by Trump. The commission was not able to find any evidence of voter fraud. 2020 election. On April 7th, 2020, Donald Trump claims that there was voter fraud in the form of people filling out multiple ballots and dumping ballots for Trump, after claiming mail-in voting was okay when he did it, but not when other people do it.
Critical of mail-in voting, mail-in ballots for voting.
I think mail-in voting is horrible.
But you voted by
It's
mail
corrupt.
in Florida's election last month, didn't you?
Sure, I could vote by mail for that.
How do you reconcile
Because I'm
that?
allowed to. Well, that's called out of state. You know why I voted? Because I happen to be in the White House and I won't be able to go to Florida to vote.
What's the difference between mailing within
well, there's a
state or
big
mailing
difference
outside the
between
state?
somebody that's out of state and does a ballot and everything sealed, certified, and everything else. You see what you have to do with the certifications. And you get thousands and thousands of people sitting in somebody's living room signing ballots all over the place. No, I think that mail-in voting is a terrible thing. I think if you vote, you should go. And even the concept of early voting is not the greatest because a lot of things happen. But it's okay. But you should go and you should vote. I think you should go and you should vote. You look at what they do, where they grab thousands of mail-in ballots and they dump it. I'll tell you what, and I don't have to tell you, you can look at the statistics. There's a lot of dishonesty going along with mail-in voting, mail-in ballots.
Thank you for that very true statement, Donald J. Trump. Moving on. On May 20th, Donald Trump answered in a press briefing that thousands and thousands of mail-in ballots were fraudulently filled out. On May 24th, 2020, Donald Trump tweeted that the United States cannot have mail-in ballots, saying it would be the greatest rigged election in history. On August 24th, 2020, Trump states that the only way they can lose the election is if it's rigged and someone takes it from us. On September 23rd, 2020, Donald Trump would not commit to a peaceful transfer of power, claiming that the mail-in ballots were fraudulent and out of control.
Hello, I'm Martin Sheen with an urgent question. Of course, I'm supporting Kamala Harris 100%.
Obviously.
But we need to know whether millions more of us are behind her as well.
Yes, we sure do.
Win, lose, or draw in this election, will you commit here today for a peaceful transferal of power after the election? And there has been rioting in Louisville, there's been rioting in many cities across this country, red and your so-called red and blue states. Will you commit to making sure that there is a peaceful transferal of power after the election?
Well, we're going to have to see what happens. You know that I've been complaining very strongly about the ballots, and the ballots are a disaster.
I understand that, but people are rioting. Do you commit to making sure that there's a peaceful transferal of power?
We want to get rid of the ballots, and you'll have a very peaceful. There won't be a transfer, frankly. There'll be a continuation. The ballots are out of control. You know it. And you know who knows it better than anybody else? The Democrats know it better than anybody else. Go ahead.
The second question is, will you...
Please, go ahead.
Why won't
you asked the question.
Why won't you...
Thank you, Mr. Trump. Very presidential-like. On September 29th, 2020, Trump claimed that mail-in ballots being sent out preemptively were all fraudulently done by the Democrats, and that Americans were going to see a fraud like you've never seen. He also claims that we don't know for months for the counting of the mail-in ballots. Trump fluidly switched between definitions when he claimed the election was rigged, meaning it could be officials rigging polls, ballot boxes being stuffed, ballots being not counted, boxes being tossed, vote totals being changed, etc., etc. It's important to note that while Donald Trump claims ahead of time that voter fraud would be rampant in 2020, he never actually gives a way to make mail-in ballots more secure. He simply advocates for the elimination of them altogether, repeatedly because he knows they will favor Democratic voters. Donald Trump attempted to call the election early on the night of, despite everyone across the nation knowing it would take some time to count the incoming mail-in ballots. He also falsely claimed he won many states by margins that were impossible to overcome, despite having been completely untrue, and continues to call the mail-in ballots fraudulent. Claiming that he already won the election, on November 5th, the next morning he went as far as to tweet, "Stop the count so he won't lose his majority." And then you got the nice article here. So yeah, not exactly as, white as we think it was. And stop the count. Stop the count. November 5th, 2020, 9:12 a.m. Not very good. A leaked audio recording from October 31st, 2020 of Steve Bannon shows him speaking about Trump's plan to call the election early. Multiple recordings of Roger Stone affirm the same.
You're going to have to get used to asking questions that might make you a little bit
uncomfortable.
Will.
And what Trump's going to do is just declare victory, right? He's going to declare victory. But that doesn't mean he's the winner. He's just going to say he's the winner. The Democrats, more of our people vote early that count. Theirs voted mail. And so they're going to have a natural disadvantage, and Trump's going to take advantage of it. That's our strategy. He's going to declare himself a winner. So when you wake up Wednesday morning, it's going to be a firestorm. We're going to have Antifa crazy, the media crazy, the courts are crazy, and Trump's going to be sitting there mocking, tweeting shit out, you lose. I'm the winner. I'm the king. And he'll be all over. He'll be going, "Where's Hunter? Is Hunter on a crack pipe?" I mean, no, he'll be, because then it doesn't matter. Remember, here's the thing. After that, Trump never has to go to a voter again. He's going to fire Ray, the FBI director, and fire the. He's going to say, "Fuck you." How about that? Because he's never going to. He's done his last election. Oh, he's going to be off the chain. He's going to be crazy. Also, if Trump is losing by 10 or 11 o'clock at night, it's going to be even crazier. Because he's going to sit right there and say they stole it.
Agree.
I'm directing the Attorney General to shut down all ballot places in all 50 states. It's going to be no. He's not going out easy. If Biden's winning, Trump is going to do some crazy shit.
Steve Bannon, as you know, was Trump's 2016, or part of Trump's 2016 campaign. And Roger Stone was also a close friend of Trump.
Do after the election. Let's just hope we're celebrating. I really do suspect it'll still be up in the air. But when that happens, the key thing to do is to claim victory. Possession is 9/10 of the law. No, we won. You. Sorry, over. We won. Yeah. You're wrong. You.
ABC.
I said, Lord, let's get right to the violence. That's what I'm doing. You have to start smashing pumpkins if you know what I mean. The select
from the January 6th committee. Dominion v. Fox News. In June of 2021, Dominion filed a complaint against Fox News, alleging that the company engaged in a widespread campaign of defamatory behavior towards Dominion in order to salvage its reputation among conservative media listeners. Dominion's lawsuit accused Fox of lying on 4 separate claims. 1. Dominion committed election fraud by rigging the 2020 presidential election. 2. Dominion's software and algorithms manipulated vote counts of the 2020 presidential election. 3. Dominion is owned by a company founded in Venezuela to rig elections for the dictator Hugo Chavez. And 4. Dominion paid kickbacks to government officials who used its machines in the 2020 presidential elections. The factual allegations. Dominion was established in 2002 by CEO John Podos and procured its first contract with New York State in July 2009. After it became clear that Trump would lose into the election, on November 6th, Donald Trump began to complain that the lead had mysteriously disappeared. On November 7th, Fox predicted Trump had lost the election. On November 8th, Fox invited Sidney Powell onto the Sunday Morning Future Show to discuss Dominion voting fraud. Powell declared that there was, quote, a massive and coordinated effort to steal the election from we the people of the United States of America to delegitimize and destroy votes for Donald Trump, to manufacture votes for Joe Biden, end quote. More to the complaint. I don't have time to read all. Me either. Dominion's motion for summary judgment contains many damning emails showing that Fox News was knowingly captivating on fraudulent election claims to win back their audience after election night. Page 125 shows a perfectly through line of how the misinformation was knowingly propagated by Fox News hosts. Page 25, what was Trump's involvement? Then here are some death threats. Then we can just let's go down to that page 25. From Leonard Barducci. Subject, Brain Room. Background, Dominion voting systems and criticisms/accusations fact check. Trump. Report Dominion deleted 2.7 million Trump votes nationwide. Data analysis finds 221,000 Pennsylvania votes switched from President Trump to Biden. 941,000 Trump votes deleted. States using Dominion voting systems switched 435,000 votes from Trump to Biden. The facts. There's no evidence of widespread fraud in the 2020 election or of major problems with Dominion systems. Election officials from both political parties have stated publicly that the election went well, with international observers confirmed there were no serious irregularities. 125. Okay, I see what it's going to be. $125. From Sidney Powell to Lou Dobbs. We have a warning to the mainstream media. You have purposely sided with the forces that are trying to overthrow the U.S. system. These 4 people and their collaborators executed an electoral 9/11 against the United States with the cooperation and collusion of the media and the Democratic Party in China. It is a cyber Pearl Harbor. Shreya learns too of cyber Pearl Harbor. Lewis' wife just sent this to Eric and Alex. I think it's from Sydney. It looks like she might be making these claims on the show. I don't have any evidence. I don't know what her evidence is. I told Alex to make sure Lou pushes on the veracity of this. I find it odd that she claims to have this evidence, but her cases are being thrown out. I just wanted to send to you so you weren't surprised if it happens. Testimony of Alexander Hooper. I had reservations about putting it on air. I hadn't had time to look into the document, honestly, who was a senior producer at Fox. December 10th, tweet from Dobbs right before the show. The 2020 election is a cyber Pearl Harbor. The left-wing establishment have aligned their forces to overthrow the United States government. Testimony of Lou Dobbs, who is the host of Lou Dobbs Tonight. Question. The tweet states the 2020 election is a cyber Pearl Harbor. The left-wing establishment have aligned their forces to overthrow the United States government. #MAGA, #America First, #Dobbs. Correct. December 10th tweet, right after the show. Cyber Pearl Harbor. Sidney Powers reveals groundbreaking new evidence indicating a presidential election came under massive cyber attack orchestrated with the help of Dominion, Smartmatic, and foreign adversaries. Testimony of Lou Dobbs. In the moments after your 5 o'clock broadcast on December 10th, were you, Lou Dobbs, concerned that Sidney Powell had failed once again to meet the expectation of providing evidence to support her claims? I was disappointed. Yes. Oh, Hannity. I did not believe it for 1 second. The host of the Hannity Show. I was asking who else you consider in that group, so just names of the people that you consider to be fucking lunatics at that point. Just the people that were... Anybody that was involved in pushing that whole narrative that Sydney was pushing. I did not believe it for 1 second. So, when she told you that because eyewitnesses to the vote rigging by Dominion were people who actually were threatened or in fear of something happening to them, and that's why they refused to give evidence, did you become even more skeptical of Sidney Powell because of that explanation? That was the nail in the coffin for me. So, I think you testified when she said that to you on your radio show that afternoon. That was the nail in the coffin for you, right? For me it was, yes. I felt like there was never going to be forthcoming evidence. And with that knowledge, you brought her on your show to make those same allegations onto your Fox News primetime show, right? I thought it was beyond newsworthy because she had never said that Powell would not produce evidence. Publicly, that I am more private of that. And you brought her on to talk both about the president's photo of Michael Flynn and about her election fraud allegations, right? I knew I would hit both topics. She was on my radio show earlier in that day as well, sir. So the short answer is yes, you knew that when she came on your show that night, she was going to talk about her Dominion allegations. The short answer is I knew I would ask her about that, yes, sir. The Dominion v. Fox News case is a very interesting one if you ever want to get that agreed. Back to Trump, though. Election night. The election occurred on November 3rd and went as everyone predicted, with Trump initially having a large lead and then slowly losing it as mail-in ballots were counted as the night progressed. At 11:20 p.m., Fox News called Arizona for Joe Biden, sending Trump and his team into a fury. Jason Miller tweeted out admonishing Fox News for calling the election early. Jared Kushner was also in contact with Rupert Murdoch as the night went on. At 2:30 a.m. the following morning, Donald Trump told supporters, "This is a fraud on the American public." Trump said he wanted to go to the Supreme Court to stop the counting of ballots, then declared himself the winner of the election. Pence went up on stage afterwards, contradicting Trump and saying that while he was sure they'd won the election, he would wait until every vote was counted. This was the clip that I mentioned previously in my manifesto.
Did you know that a simple glass of water could be sabotaging your battle against type 2 diabetes?
Wow.
Pay attention. Blood glucose up to 100.
This is a fraud on the American public. This is an embarrassment to our country. We were getting ready to win this election. Frankly, we did win this election. So our goal now is to ensure the integrity for the good of this nation. This is a very big moment. This is a major fraud in our nation. We want the law to be used in a proper manner. So we'll be going to the U.S. Supreme Court. We want all voting to stop. We don't want them to find any ballots at 4 o'clock in the morning and add them to the list, okay? It's a very sad moment. To me, this is a very sad moment, and we will win this, and as far as I'm concerned, we already have won it. So I just want to thank you, and I want to thank all of our support. I want to thank all of the people that worked with us, and Mr. Vice President, say a few words, please. Please.
Thank you, Mr. President. I want to join you in thanking more than 60 million Americans who have already cast their vote for 4 more years for President Donald Trump in the White House. And while the votes continue to be counted, we're going to remain vigilant, as the President said. The right to vote has been at the center of our democracy since the founding of this nation, and we're going to protect the integrity of the vote. But I really believe with all of my heart, with the extraordinary margins, Mr. President, that you've inspired in the states that you just described, and the way that you launched this movement across the country to make America great again, I truly do believe, as you do, that we are on the road to victory and we will make America great again.
Road to victory. Still gonna allow those states to count. So, thank you. Pence. Legal challenges. In July of 2022, a collection of 8 different conservative judges, politicians, and analysts published a report called Lost, Not Stolen, the conservative case that Trump lost and Biden won the 2020 presidential election. In the report, they go through all 64 cases that the Trump campaign put forth to judges claiming that every case was without merit and from the result of the 2020 election. From the court case. We therefore have undertaken an examination of every claim of fraud and miscount put forward by former President Trump and his advocates, and now put the results of those investigations before the American people, especially before fellow conservatives who may be uncertain about what and whom to believe. Our conclusion is unequivocal. Joe Biden was the choice of a majority of the electors, who themselves were the choice of the majority of voters in their states. The Trump campaign's court cases. Quoting from Lost Not Stolen, of the 64 cases brought by Trump and his supporters, 20 were dismissed before a hearing on the merits, 14 were voluntarily dismissed by Trump and his supporters before a hearing on the merits, and 30 cases including a hearing on the merits. Only in one Pennsylvania case involving 42 votes to overturn the results did Trump and his supporters prevail. 2,000 Mules. On May 20th, 2022, well-known far-right conspiracy theorist Dinesh D'Souza published a film called 2,000 Mules, where they alleged, with no solid evidence, that Democrats had organized a sophisticated system of ballot harvesting across several states. In October of 2022, Atlanta citizen Mark Andrews filed lawsuits for defamation, conspiracy, and intrusion on seclusion. A state investigation found that he had not committed any of the crimes alleged about him in the film. And on May 31st, 2024, Salem Media Group settled with Andrews, releasing a public apology, and taking down the film and book. Trump's calls to change votes. Donald Trump's January 2nd, 2021 call to Brad Raffensperger. On January 2nd, 2024, Donald Trump, joined by trade advisor Peter Navarro, Justice Department official John Law Professor John C. Eastman, and attorneys Rudy Giuliani, Cleta Mitchell, Alex Kaufman, Kurt Hilbert, and White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows, called Georgia Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger, joined by Raffensperger's Chief of Staff Jordan Fuchs and General Counsel Ryan Germany, to discuss finding enough votes to win the election. Trump claimed, with no evidence, that there were hundreds of thousands of signature forgeries, that 50s of thousands of people had already been voted for, 4,502 people voted who were not on the voter registration roll, 18,000 people voted with vacant addresses, 900 voters who used a P.O. box number, at least 18,000 votes counted multiple times by Ruby Freeman. The water main breaking disrupted the vote process for maleficence, that boxes of fake votes were brought in to be counted. More and more dumb claims. Also, Trump continued to make accusations during the call, dismissing claims that he was simply getting these accusations from social media by countering them that they were actually coming from Trump media. He also accuses Raffensperger of being criminally liable for not finding enough votes for Trump because they must have known that the voter fraud, and says that would be a big risk for both of them if they weren't able to flip the election in favor of Trump. If you watch my indictment video from Jack Smith, you have already heard these. Trump says to Raffensperger, "I think it's very dangerous for you to say that there's no criminality," and alludes to him engaging in criminal behavior many times during the call. Multiple times on the call, Donald Trump implies that he will refuse to help in the future elections if Raffensperger won't acquiesce to his demands for 11,000 votes. I need 11,000 votes. Give me a break. Trump's campaign launched lawsuits against the state and contest the results, but ended up voluntarily dismissing it the day before court. Trump made a phone call to the election investigator Francis Watson on December 23, 2020, repeating a lot of the false claims he go on to repeat Raffensperger later on. Keep in mind, Trump is making these calls as a private citizen and as a presidential elect. If Joe Biden was making calls to, say, I don't know, Gretchen Whitmer or whoever the version of Raffensperger would be in, like, Michigan, and he asked him to find me votes, this is very criminal what you're doing, and I won't help you in future elections if you don't help me. And then after all that gets dismissed, he goes into an election investigator in Michigan and talks to them, also repeating all the stuff. You just know for a fact what would happen. Rightfully so. And now Trump pushing knowingly false claims. This is a very good section. Kind of making the claim, then, being informed that the claim is false, then making it a couple of days later, 1 week, sometime. All of these are taken from the January 6th report, starting on page 48. So, if you want to... That's the link. J6 report.pdf. Luckily, we have it all here. Will I go through all of these? You know what? Why not? Being informed of the false claim, then continuing to spread the false claim. Then Deputy Attorney General Jeffrey Rosen, 12/15/20. And so we said, well, what about this? I saw it on the videotape, someone delivering a suitcase of ballots, and we said, it wasn't a suitcase, it was a bin. That's what they use when they're counting ballots. It's benign. Donald Trump, 1 week later, there was even security camera footage from Georgia that shows officials telling poll watchers to leave the room before pulling suitcases of ballots out from under the table and continuing to count for hours. Acting Deputy Attorney General Richard Donahue, I told the President myself that several times in several conversations that these allegations about ballots being smuggled in a suitcase and run through the machine several times, it was not true. Then we looked at it. We looked at the video. We interviewed the witnesses. That was not true. I believed it was in the phone call on December 27th. It was also in a meeting in the Oval Office on December 31st. Trump later that week, she stuffed the machine. She stuffed the ballot. Each ballot went 3 times. They were showing. He was ballot number 1. He was the second time, third time, next ballot. Georgia's Secretary of State, Brad Raffensperger, you're talking about the State Farm video, and I think it's extremely unfortunate that Rudy Giuliani or his people, they sliced and diced that video and took it out of context. We did an audit of that, and we proved conclusively that they were not scanned 3 times. Yes, Mr. President. Yes, Mr. President. We'll send you the link from WSB. Trump, I don't care about a link. I don't need it. Trump 1 day later. I spoke to Brad Raffensperger yesterday about Fulton County and voter fraud in Georgia. He was unwilling or unable to answer questions such as the ballots under the table scam, ballot destruction, out-of-state voters, dead voters, and more. He has no clue. That is just a flat-out lie. Attorney General Barr. Then he raised the big vote dump, as he called it, in Detroit. And he said people saw boxes coming into the counting station at all hours of the morning and so forth. I said, Mr. President, there were 630 precincts in Detroit. And unlike elsewhere in the state, they centralized the counting process. So they're not counted in each precinct. They moved to counting stations and to the normal process, and so the normal process would involve boxes coming in at all different hours, I said. Did anyone point out to you, did all the people complaining about it point out to you, you actually did better in Detroit than you did last time? I mean, there's no indication of fraud in Detroit. Trump 1 day later. I'll tell you what's wrong. Voter fraud. Here's an example. This is Michigan at 6:31 in the morning. A vote dump of 149,772 votes came in unexpectedly. We were winning by a lot. That batch was received in horror. In Detroit, everyone saw the tremendous conflict. There were more votes than there were voters. Acting Deputy Attorney General Richard Donahue. The president then continued, there were more votes than voters, but I was aware of that allegation, and I said, that was just a matter of them comparing the 2020 votes cast to 2016 registration numbers. That is not a valid complaint. Trump 10 days later. More votes than they had voters, and many other states also. Acting Deputy Attorney General Richard Donahue. We would say to him, we checked that out and there's nothing to it, and we would cite to certain allegations, and so such as Pennsylvania, right? No, there were not 250,000 more votes reported than were actually cast. That's not true, so we would say things like that. Trump 3 days later. In Pennsylvania, you had 205,000 more votes than you had voters, and the number is actually much greater than that now. That was as of a week ago, and this is a mathematical impossibility unless we want to say it's a total fraud. Georgia Secretary of State Raffensperger again. Trump, it's 4,502 who voted, but they weren't on the voter registration roll, which they had to be. You had 18,325 vacant address voters. The address was vacant, and they're not allowed to be counted. That's 18,325. Raffensperger, well, Mr. President, the challenge that you have is the data you have is wrong. Trump 2 days later. 4,502 illegal ballots were cast by individuals who do not appear on the state's voter rolls. Well, that's sort of strange. 18,325 illegal ballots were cast by individuals who's registered to vote using an address listed as vacant according to the Postal Service. Raffensperger again. Trump. So dead people voted, and I think the number is close to 5,000 people, and they went to obituaries. They went to all sorts of methods to come up with an accurate number, and the minimum is close to about 5,000 voters. Raffensperger. The actual number were two people that were dead that voted. So that's wrong. Trump 4 days later. The number of fraudulent ballots that were identified across the state is staggering. Over 10,300 ballots in Georgia were cast by individuals whose names and dates of birth match Georgia residents who died in 2020 and prior to the election. Georgia Secretary of State General Counsel Ryan Germany. Trump, you had an out-of-state voters. They voted in Georgia, but they were from out-of-state of 4,925. Germany. Everyone we've been through are people that lived in Georgia, moved to a different state, but then moved back in Georgia legitimately. They moved back in years ago. This was not like something just before the election. So there's something about that data that it's just not accurate. Trump 4 days later. And at least 15,000 ballots were cast by individuals who moved out of the state prior to November 3rd election. They say they moved right back. White House Press Secretary Kylie McEnemy. The one specific I remember referencing was I don't agree with the Dominion track. I specifically referenced waving him off of the Dominion theory earlier in my testimony. Are you saying you think he still continued to tweet that after you waved him off of it? Yeah. President Trump between mid-November and January 5th. President Trump tweeted or retweeted conspiracy theories about Dominion nearly 3 dozen times. Trump campaign senior advisor Jason Miller. The international allegations for Dominion were not valid. Okay, did anyone communicate that to the president? I know that was communicated. I know I communicated. Trump, you have Dominion, which is very, very suspect to start off with. Nobody knows the ownership. People say the votes are counted in foreign countries, and much worse. Attorney General Barr. I specifically raised the Dominion voting machines, which I found to be one of the most disturbing allegations. Disturbing in the sense I saw absolutely zero basis for the allegations. I told him that it was crazy stuff, and they were wasting their time on that, and it was doing great disservice to the country. Trump 3 days later. Those machines are fixed, they're rigged. You can press Trump and the vote goes to Biden. All you have to do is play with a chip, and they play with a chip, especially in Wayne County and Detroit. Attorney General Barr. I explained, I said, look, if you have a machine and it counts 500 votes for Biden and 500 votes for Trump, and then you go back later and you will have the 1,000 pieces of paper put through that machine, and you can see if there's any discrepancy. There has been no discrepancy. Trump 1 day later. In one Michigan county, as an example, they used Dominion systems, they found that nearly 6,000 votes have been wrongly switched from Trump to Biden. And this is just the tip of the iceberg. This is what we caught. How many didn't we catch? Attorney General Barr. I will, Mr. President, but there were a couple of things I responded. My understanding is our experts have looked at the Antrim situation and are sure it was a human error that did not kill anyone else. And in any event, Antrim is doing a hand recount of the paper ballots, so we should know in a couple of days whether there was any real problem with the machines. Trump, 1 day later. This is big news. Dominion voting machines are a disaster all over the country. Changed the results of a landslide election. Can't let this happen. Then Deputy Attorney General Jeffrey Rosen. Other people were telling him there was fraud, corruption in the election. The voting machines were no good. And we were telling him that is inconsistent. By we, I mean Richard Donahue and myself. And that was not what we were saying. There was this open issue as to the Michigan report, and I think it was Mr. Cusinelli, not certain, but had indicated that there was a hand recount, and I think we said that's the gold standard. Trump, 1 day later, study Dominion machines shifted 2 to 3% of Trump votes to Biden, far more votes than needed to sway election. Florida, Ohio, Texas, and many other states were won by even greater margins than projected. Did just as well with swing states, but bad things happened at OANN. National Security Advisor Robert O'Brien. I got a call from, I think, Monty Michael in Outer Oval, the president's assistant, and she said, I'm connecting you to the Oval. Somebody asked me, did I have any evidence of election fraud in the voting machines or foreign interference on voting machines? And I said, no, we've looked into that and there's no evidence of it. Trump, 1 day later. There could have also been a hit on our ridiculous voting machines during the election, which is now obvious that I won big, making an even more corrupted embarrassment for the USA. At DNI_Radcliffe at Secretary Pompeo. Acting Deputy Richard Donahue. We definitely talked about Antrim County again. That was sort of done at the point because the hand recount had been done and all of that, but we decided back to that to say, this is an example of what people are telling you and what's being filed in some of these court filings that are just not supported by the evidence. Trump 2 days later. Well, Brad, not that there's not an issue because we have a big issue with Dominion in other states and perhaps in yours. In other states, we think we found tremendous corruption with Dominion machines, but we'll have to see. I don't give Dominion a pass because we found too many bad things. Secretary of State Ravensburger. I don't believe that you're really questioning the Dominion machines because we did a hand retally, 100% retally of all the ballots and compared them to what the machine said and came up with virtually the same result. Then we did the recount and we got virtually the same result. Trump 4 days later. In addition, there was the highly troubling matter of Dominion voting systems, as when in Michigan County alone, 6,000 votes were switched from Trump to Biden and the same systems are used in the majority of states in our country. There was clear evidence that tens of thousands of votes were switched from President Trump to former President Biden in several counties and Georgia. The district court declared that Trump and Eastman knowingly filed bogus court cases in order to further fight over the certification of the election and to obstruct the January 6th committee from obtaining evidence of any conspiracy. United States District Court, Central District of California, Southern Division, case number blah blah blah. There were 4 documents, however, in which Dr. Eastman and other attorneys suggest that, irrespective of the merits, its primary goal of filing is to delay or otherwise disrupt the January 6th vote. In one email, for example, President Trump's attorney states that, quote, merely having this case pending in the Supreme Court, not ruled on, might be enough to delay consideration of Georgia, end quote. This email, read in context with other documents in this review, it's clear that President Trump filed certain lawsuits not to obtain legal relief, but to disrupt or delay the January 6th congressional proceedings through the courts. The court finds that these 4 documents are sufficiently related to and in furtherance of the obstruction crime. Accordingly, the crime and fraud exception applies, and the court orders Dr. Eastman to disclose the 4 documents. On December 4th, 2020, President Trump and his attorneys alleged in a Georgia state court action that Fulton County improperly counted the number of votes, including 10,350 deceased people, 2,560 felons, and 2,423 unregistered voters. President Trump and his attorneys then decided to contest the state court proceeding in federal court and discuss incorporating by reference the voter fraud numbers alleged in the state petition. On December 30th, 2020, Dr. Eastman relayed concerns from President Trump's team, quote, about including specific numbers of the paragraph dealing with felons, deceased, moved, etc., end quote. The attorneys continued to discuss the president's resistance to signing, quote, when specific numbers were included, end quote, as Dr. Eastman explained the next day. Quote, although the president signed a verification for the state court filing back on December 1st, he has since been made aware that some of the allegations and evidence proffered by the experts has been inaccurate. For him to sign a new verification without knowledge and incorporation by reference would not be accurate, end quote. President Trump and his attorneys ultimately filed the complaint with the same inaccurate numbers without rectifying, clarifying, or otherwise changing them. President Trump, moreover, signed a verification swearing under oath that the incorporated inaccurate numbers, quote, are true and correct, or, quote, believed to be true and correct, end quote, to the best of his knowledge and belief. The email showed that Donald Trump knew that specific numbers of voter fraud were wrong, but continued to tout those numbers, both in court and to the public. The court finds that these emails are sufficiently related to and in furtherance of a conspiracy to defraud the United States. People who told Trump he lost. All of these people were trusted by Trump to investigate claims of election fraud. Bill Stepien, Trump's national field director for his campaign, a lifelong Republican who also worked on Giuliani's presidential campaign in 2007 to 08, told Trump he had lost on election night. Chris Miller, Trump's director of the National Counterterrorism Center, attested that Matt Orzechowski, Trump's campaign top data scientist, told him on election night that he was going to lose. William Barr, Trump's Attorney General of the DOJ, told Trump repeatedly that he had investigated and found absolutely no signs of voter fraud. Jeffrey Rosen, Trump's acting Attorney General of the DOJ, called or met with Trump almost every day to tell him that there was no election fraud. Richard Donahue, Trump's acting Deputy Attorney General, told Trump the information he was getting was false. Chris Steiwall, former Fox News political editor, said that Trump had no chance of winning the election after the votes were counted. Jason Miller, the Trump campaign senior advisor, informed Trump several times that there wasn't enough evidence to fraud over the election. Quote, when our research and campaign legal team can't back up any of the claims made by our elite strike force legal team, you can see why we're 0-32 in our cases. I'll obviously hustle to help on all fronts, but it's tough to own any of this when it's all just conspiracy shit being down from the mothership, end quote. That was also in the January 6th indictment that I read. Mike Pence, Trump's vice president, said there was never evidence of widespread fraud and that he believed there was no good evidence of enough fraud to overturn the election. Matthew Morgan, the general counsel of Trump's campaign, claimed that the Trump staff, including him and Mark Short and Greg Jacob, didn't believe there was sufficient evidence of voter fraud. Brad Raffensperger, the Republican Georgia Secretary of State, denied every single claim that Trump made about election fraud. Brian Kemp, the Republican governor of Georgia, denied that the election was stolen in Georgia. A group of prominent Republicans, 4 federal judges, 2 former senators, a lawyer, and someone who worked on Capitol Hill for 20 years, published a conservative report titled Lost Not Stolen, which claimed the report concludes that Donald Trump and his supporters had the day in court and failed to produce substantive evidence to make their case. President Trump and his legal allies failed because of a lack of evidence and not because of erroneous rulings or unfair judges. In many cases, after making up extravagant claims of wrongdoing, Trump's legal representation showed up in court or state proceedings empty-handed and then returned to their rallies and media campaigns to repeat the same unsupported claims. End quote. 11 of the judges who ruled against Trump were Trump federal judiciary appointments. One of those Trump nominees, Judge Stephanos Bibas of the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Third Circuit, rejected an appeal by the Trump campaign, claiming that Pennsylvania officials did not undertake any meaningful effort to fight illegal absentee ballots and uneven treatment of voters across counties. Judge Bibas wrote in his decision that, quote, calling an election unfair does not make it so. Charges require specific allegations and then prove we have neither here, end quote. Another Trump nominee, Judge Brett Ludwig of the Eastern District of Wisconsin, ruled against President Trump's lawsuit, alleging that the result was skewed by illegal procedures that govern drop boxes, ballot address information, and individuals who claimed infinitely confined status to vote from home. Judge Ludwig wrote in his decision that, quote, this court has allowed plaintiff the chance to make the case, and he has lost on the merits because the procedures used do not remotely rise to the level of breaking Wisconsin's elections rules, end quote. Ivanka and Kushner, Trump's daughter and son-in-law, prepared to move right after the election, with Ivanka saying that she believed Barr's testimony. Alex Cannon, Trump's campaign lawyer, said he told advisors that there was no election fraud. Kellyanne Conway, Trump's counselor, wrote in her published memo that she had told Trump he lost. Quote, the team had failed on November 3rd, and they failed again afterward by not confronting the candidate with the grim reality of the situation, that the proof had not surfaced to support the claims. They denied him the evidence he sought and the respect he was due. And said, supplicant after the sycophant, after showman, genuflected in front of the resolute desk and promised the president goods they could not deliver, end quote. Ken Block, a data mining firm hired by Donald Trump to find evidence of voter fraud, said they found very little evidence of voter fraud and that was equal on the Democratic and Republican side. The black box votes hidden under the tables in Georgia. Rudy Giuliani tweeted a heavily cut video propagated by OAN that claimed boxes of illegitimately filed ballot boxes were being counted after election officials told counters to go home. Watch. Video footage from Georgia shows suitcases filled with ballots pulled from under a table after supervisors told poll workers to leave room and 4 people stay behind to keep counting votes. Election officials investigated and released additional video and explanations showing that these claims were fabricated.
Your voice, your vote. And for the 3rd time, counties across Georgia have certified votes from November's presidential election.
The Secretary of State is expected to actually certify the statewide results today as well. The outcome not expected to change, but legal challenges are still underway, including one involving that video right there from State Farm Arena, President Trump's lawyer. Other supporters, too, call it the smoking gun proving election fraud. Channel 2 investigative reporter Justin Gray spent the day with Georgia elections officials, as we saw in that video. And Justin, we saw it. You went frame by frame to uncover and then really show everyone what happened.
Yeah, George, we spent a lot of time today with the state's lead investigator. We looked at that video for hours, going through it very carefully, looking not just at that short clip that Rudy Giuliani shared, but also the critical hours before it and after it, going through the chain of custody for those ballots in question the entire time.
You went through hours.
Yes. We went frame by frame with state election investigators. They've already spent hours analyzing this video, looking at the election night surveillance tape that President Trump's personal attorney Rudy Giuliani calls a smoking gun. Quote, suitcases pulled from under a table.
We can show exactly when they were placed under there.
So these were not mystery
This is the person that Trump called.
Mystery location.
No.
They were right there in the room.
Yes.
People watched them placed in those boxes.
Yes.
This is the short section of the video the Trump team has shared. It's not suitcases being pulled from under that table, but official sealed ballot containers. If we go back in the video to hours before, you can see that table being brought into the room at 8:22 a.m. Nothing underneath, no hidden suitcases. Then we can see at 10 p.m. with the room full of people, including official monitors and the media, as ballots that have been opened but not counted are placed in the boxes, sealed up and stored under the table. The reason? Employees thought they were done for the night.
They were planning on going home.
Yes. As you can tell by the fact that they're sealing everything up and preparing to leave. Here's where there was confusion. Media and observers left as employees packed up. But this phone call changed that. Fulton's election director called the supervisor here to say, keep working, keep counting. After the Secretary of State's office called him to say you shouldn't stop this early. That's when employees pulled these containers of ballots back out, the so-called smoking gun video, and went back to work. These are the same ballots official monitors watched them put away.
No magical appearing ballots. These were ballots that were processed in front of the monitors, put in the boxes in front of the monitors, and placed there in front of the monitors.
So what about that gap? Well, this is what happened during the roughly an hour before an official state observer returned. Employees scanned ballots.
These are just typical everyday election workers who are just doing their jobs. I mean, it's not like this is an Ocean's 11 level scheme that was put together in the middle of the night.
Now, there was about an hour there before the state official monitor got back. But if you watch that video, you see what they're doing. They're scanning those ballots. The state election lead investigator looked at all that video, hours of it, says she sees no evidence whatsoever of any wrongdoing. Reporting live at the state capitol, Justin Gray, Channel 2 Action News.
So, as we see, that entire thing was disproven. Giuliani would later admit to lying in court about this case, claiming it was his First Amendment right to lie. He would lose that case to the tune of $148 million and then have a bankruptcy case dismissed that he filed to avoid paying this debt due to lying about his assets. Giuliani claims the First Amendment lets him lie. That one. Here we go. Defendant Giuliani concedes solely for purposes of this litigation before this court and on appeal that Defendant Giuliani made the statements of and concerning plaintiffs, which include all the statements detailed in plaintiff's submitted complaint, ECF number 22 at subsection 57-101, and he does not dispute for purposes of this litigation that the statements carry meaning that is defamatory per se, that Defendant Giuliani, for the purposes of this litigation only, published those statements to third parties, that Defendant Giuliani, for the purposes of this litigation only, does not contest that, to the extent that the statements were made of fact and otherwise actionable, such actionable factual statements were false. This stipulation does not affect Giuliani's ability to seek set-off, offset, or settlement credit, or his argument that his statements are constitutionally protected statements or opinions, or any applicable statute of limitations, or that Giuliani's statements, in fact, earn plaintiffs any damages and the amount of any alleged is when Giuliani's statements may have cause or any other legal defense not expressly waived by the stipulation. The defendant Giuliani does not contest solely for the purposes of his litigation, including on any appeal in this litigation of actual elements of liability, subject to any retained affirmative defenses not expressly waived herein, regarding plaintiff's claim for intentional infliction of emotional distress and other related tort claims. This stipulation does not affect Giuliani's ability to seek blah 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 blah. Yeah. So. Number 3 is what the big one is. Giuliani, for the purposes of the litigation, does not contest that, to the extent the statements were statement of fact and otherwise actionable, such actionable factual statements were false. Now, the false electors scheme. Kenneth Chesbaugh's initial memos. Kenneth Chesbaugh was an attorney from Wisconsin who began working with the Trump campaign at the behest of Jim Troupis, another lawyer for Trump's campaign. Around November 9, 2020, he was responsible for the creation of the first few memos outlining a potential scheme that Trump could utilize to challenge the certification of the electoral vote on January 6. Chesbaugh believed that people gathered and falsely attested to being legitimate state electors and transmitted said votes on December 14th to Congress, and Nora that would keep Trump's chances alive to win the election should a court rule in his favor between December 14th, the date that the electors in all 50 states certified their votes for president, and January 6th, the date that Congress was scheduled to count the electoral slates. Ultimately, there were 7 different states who were selected to send false slates of electorates out from. Here were those states and the accompanying state laws that dictate how slates of electors are legally supposed to be chosen. So, basically, you got this. You got Arizona versus, you got the false slate of electors. This is the certificates that they would sign saying that we are indeed the true electors. For Georgia, here's their certificate. For Michigan, here's their fake certificate. For Nevada, here is their fake certificate. For Pennsylvania, here is their fake certificate. For Wisconsin, here is their fake certificate. And then finally for New Mexico, here is their fake certificate. For the January 6th Select Committee, on December 14th, using instructions provided by Chesbaugh, the fake Trump electors gathered and participated in signing ceremonies in all 7 states. In 5 of these states, Arizona, Georgia, Michigan, Nevada, and Wisconsin, the certificates they signed used the language that falsely declared themselves to be, quote, the duly elected and qualified electors, end quote, from their state. This declaration was false because none of the signatories had been granted that official status by their government officials in the form of a certificate of ascertainment. The paperwork signed by the fake Trump electors in 2 other states contained partial caveats. In New Mexico, the document they signed made clear that they were participating, quote, on the understanding that it might later be determined that we are the duly elected and qualified electors, end quote. In Pennsylvania, the document they signed indicated that they were participating, quote, on the understanding that if, as a result of a final non-appealable court order or other proceeding prescribed by law, we are ultimately recognized as being the duly elected and qualified electors. Even Chesbo admitted his plan was dicey at best in his December 9th memo. Which is in this New York article. From it, and quote, in conclusion, it appears that voting by an alternate slate of electors is unproblematic in Arizona and Wisconsin, slightly problematic in Michigan, requiring access to the Senate chamber, somewhat dicey in Georgia and Pennsylvania in the event that one or more electors don't attend, require gubernatorial ratification of alternates, and very problematic in Nevada given the role accorded to the Secretary of State. On December 13th, Chesbo lays out easement how Pence could declare the ECA unconstitutional and disrupt the expected electoral vote count, proceeding to allow Trump to win the election. He says that Pence should break from the state procedures of the ECA, claiming it be unconstitutional in violation of the 12th Amendment. Once Pence has recused himself from his role in the Senate, some other Republican leader will take over and act confused about how to read which slate of electors is legitimate. He then opens the two envelopes from Arizona and then announces that he cannot and will not, at least as of that date, count any electoral votes from Arizona because there are two slates of votes, and it is clear that Arizona courts did not give a full and fair opportunity for review of election irregularities, in violation of due process. Chesbo would then go on to outline ways in which the states contesting their electoral votes being counted could certify new electoral slates in the future, either by rerunning the election or engaging in adequate judicial review or having its legislature appoint electors. And this is part of that. Chesbo's secret Twitter account was leaked, at which he made multiple tweets detailing how Trump could win the election via Pence overturning the vote while the electoral votes were being overturned. And that will cut off where we are right now, seeing as this is getting a bit long, but yeah. So, we will wrap this up in the next video, starting at Donald Trump's direct involvement. Thank you very much, and I hope to see you next time. Have a good day.